So we are going from one review where I talked about an upscaled recolor of a smaller Optimus Prime that was one of my favorite figures of all time to, well, the exact same thing again. I guess welcome to the week of vaguely related two-parters. So, this is something I talked about a long while ago, and something that's been a long time coming. The original plan was to review this the day I covered the red Cheetor. I had it all lined up and everything, and then I found the Cheetor, and I decided to do a video on that because I wanted to make To Protect and Attack happy, since they'd been asking me to do a video on a figure from the red line since it started, and that one seemed to be up my alley. I figured it would only be delayed one video, but then I got the Kingdom Dinobot and the 86 Jazz, and those took precedent, so I was going to do it after that. But then I had to do the 100 video special, so I was going to do it for the next one. But then the red RC sucked so bad that I needed to warn Prime fans not to waste their money, even though I got that figure in the hopes of telling them that it was worth getting. Then I managed to get the Beast Wars Megatron, then the Optus Pexus, then people were talking about how much they were missing What's the Best. Then I got tonight. Then there were figure reveals I needed to talk about. Then I did X-Bands. Eventually, I almost kind of forgot about it until after I started the week of Ultra Magnuses, and I had to wait until that was over, and then it was actually supposed to be the previous video, but then Kaylin Tomlinson got struck by a motor vehicle and requested the Light of Freedom, and ultimately that led to this review being delayed by 20 videos. I have never been driven so off task before. There have been reviews that I intended to do since the start of my channel, and they never happened, but they didn't have a single day set for when I planned on doing them, let alone a dozen. So, let's finally talk about this after all this time. This is the Ayoi Mech knockoff upgraded masterpiece scaled Siege Optimus Prime, or Nemesis Prime this time. That was a mouthful. Another simple repaint of the Optimus Prime from Siege. And yes, you heard me right, upgraded. They turned many of his joints into ratchets, removed the wrist kibble, and tightened up the backpack. The Siege Prime is one of my favorite Optimuses of all time, and this is an upgraded version of that. And yet, it manages to lose a little bit of the magic. Let me explain. The look of this is very much in line with the Nemesis Prime release of the mold, but the paints are much nicer and have a strong metallic sheen to them, and the backpack is designed to cinch down so it hides better from the front. The back looks okay, you would be hard-pressed to realize that this isn't how it was intended to look, but it is a good bit less tidy this way, with a lower half that is no longer a contiguous shape. And the sleeve kibble is now sticking out over the top. It honestly looks like a camping backpack now, so in a way, it's almost more purposeful, and the figure feels like it's made out of some respectably durable stuff. But at the same time, it doesn't feel as good as the actual Siege version in hand. It's hard to describe, but there was just a spark to the materials of the Siege that felt so wonderful in your grip, and this just lacks that. It feels good, just not amazing like the real one did. It does have a hefty weight to it due to some die-cast feet, and I think I'm just about the only person on Earth who doesn't care for die-cast. Yeah, it does give the figure a more satisfying weight, but it's a fake weight. It feels more robust, but it doesn't mean anything. If the plastic is brittle, what does it matter if the whole figure feels heavier? It's not helping. It's fake. You might as well just basically add weights to the figure. Why is this an obsession? Who cares how much the figure weighs when half of it is just from the feet typically? It might help a figure stand if you plant both feet, but it sure as hell doesn't help if you're trying to get it stable with one foot off the ground even a little. There is also something strange going on where I think the legs are the same length as they always were, but they look so much longer here. Maybe it's because of the lack of battle damage. That's going to be a big plus for some people. For those of you who really hated the battle damage, its complete lack of presence may elevate this for you a lot. The paint remains superb. Anything other than the battle damage on the regular figure is still painted here, and even some stuff that wasn't before. And there's so much more of this figure to cover, it's impressive that they didn't cheap out. The head kind of crashes and burns though. For the most part, it's the exact same. For the most part. His forehead crest is no longer ridged, but the rest of the helmet is untouched, so I don't know why they did that. But much more importantly, what the fuck did they do to his nose? Why would you do this? They retooled his nose to be just about triple its normal size in width. Why? He looks like an orc that squeezed its head into Prime's helmet. It doesn't look purposeful, it just looks wrong. What possessed them to do this? It's rare that a company ever does anything that stumps me this much. It's such a pointless thing to change, and yet also such a big deal. The faceplate also seems a bit less sharp. So did they completely sculpt this part again for some reason? Here's the interesting thing about that. The bridge of his nose is also higher. So a theory I have is that for some reason they took the CAD file for his faceplate and just blew that up, then trimmed off the excess material around the sides. It's the only thing that really makes sense. Not that it makes sense. Let's talk about the arms though, because they are a big draw on this thing. These are a lot cleaner now, as they've basically done away with the entire baggy sleeve look. They've taken the elbow flaps and incorporated them into the backpack, and then they took the wrist flaps and made them transform to contour to the arms on what seems like possibly some potentially brittle joints considering how thin they are. There is now a little piece of kibble down here that's for the transformation, but I honestly don't think it has any reason to exist. I feel like nothing important would change if it were gone. Another strange thing about this is actually directly off the normal mold. At this scale, it's just more apparent. For some reason, his grill abs come in sets of 2. Do you see that? 1, 2, and then they jump up, and then 1, 2, and they jump up again. And then the last one just disappears into his pecs. I feel like they all should have been the same depth, or they should have consistently raised up one after the next. A big downside of this figure is that the only accessory he comes with is his axe. The blade is cast in red translucent plastic, and it's painted as much as ever, but he doesn't get a gun. And that's a big problem, because you may be thinking, boy, it's sure good that I have all these extra guns lying around from my other figures, but here's the issue. This is a flat upscale in some areas. They took the time to redesign the arms and the backpack, as well as shave the blast effect ports off the shoulders, though not the shins or the axe for some weird reason, but they just upscaled the fists, meaning the port in them is about twice as big as normal. I've seen that there are versions of these upscale jobs out there with individually articulated fingers, but on mine, it's just the regular peg fist. So the only weapon that this guy can ever use is the axe that he comes with. And I don't know about you, but this is a lame melee weapon in my book. Poseability on this guy is interesting to say the least. He, in theory, should have all the same posing as the original figure, which was quite well articulated, and in some places he does improve on that, but in others he's worse in interesting ways. Head is on what seems to be a slightly more restricted, though very firm ball joint. Shoulders are ratcheted now, both out and around, but because of the new shape of the backpack, they can't go as far back. The backwards butterfly is also now slightly restricted because of the backpack. It's not much, but it is noticeable when you look at how much of the side tire it uncovers. Elbows still pull slightly more than a 90, legs are now ratcheted and still have as much range as ever, as well as the super deep knee, but there is a problem. I don't know if I'll be able to film this on camera effectively, but it's something that's been causing the figure to fall over on my shelves. Despite the fact that the rotations on his knees are pretty tight, the feet and the figure being heavier in general, the lack of ratchets in both bend and rotation means that the legs over time want to kind of sink into its knees if they aren't perfectly straight. They just slowly rotate under the figure's own weight till it falls down. It can take a day or two at times, but eventually they will give out. Usually it will go in about 10 minutes or so though. Transformation on this is for the most part the Siege Primes, and that was a fantastic one, so this has to be about as good, right? Unfortunately, no. Most of this is fine, but one of the few changes they made in the name of improvement actually made things in the transformation a lot worse. Because of the way the backpack now works with the sleeve cable incorporated into it, finishing the front of the truck is very challenging. These parts don't hinge out more than 90 degrees at a mostly perfect, if not slightly canted in, right angle, making it very difficult to get this part around the front of the truck. In essence, it's just slightly too small of a hole to readily fit the object that's supposed to go in it without flexing the plastic. And this is some stern stuff without a lot of play, so it's a rough and unpleasant process, especially coming out of vehicle mode. The alt mode is just the Siege Prime's cool cyber future truck. These side panels don't look quite as good, and the grille is clear instead of red. That has its own aesthetic, but I would say it's a slightly worse one. I prefer the crimson grille and headlights on the alternate normal version. So as down on this figure as I may have seemed this whole video, this is really solid. It's $40 for a masterpiece scaled Optimus based on one of the most fun Optimus molds Chug has ever produced. And to be clear, this mold still shines. It's just tarnished enough to shine a bit less. This is still leagues better than the Earthrise version. It's actually cheaper than the Power of the Primes and the ER versions, with a better, more cohesive alt mode than the Power of the Primes one. I'd say that it still does a better job at being the classic version of the character, but if that's not what you're looking for, then I'd say this is better. It has its foibles, but at the price and the scale, it's hard to go wrong. Really, the biggest thing dragging this down is not the transformation or anything else but the head. Because this thing would have a gorgeous robot mode until you hit that weird face of its. Were that not so messed up, I wouldn't hesitate to recommend this as something you should get, despite the knees and the clashy transformation. But the way that it is, you are going to have to decide for yourself if it's something that you want. And that's not half of what I have to say, but it's enough of what I have to say. And I know, you know, what everyone else tells you to do at the end of these videos. So, if you liked what you saw here, please do that. And if you'd like to take it a step further, then please, share this video with any friend you think may be interested. I hope you all enjoyed listening to me waste your time.